Samson Occom, a short narrative of my life. Samson Occom was born in paganism until he was between 16 and 17 years old. His parents lived in a place called Mohegan in New England, Connecticut. He and his parents lived a life like any other Native American who lived in Mohegan. They lived mainly by hunting, fishing, and bear hunting to survive. In addition, he lived in wigwams, which were like a kind of tent that was covered with mats and were made of flax. In the tribe where they lived, they didn't cultivate the land, nor did they raise any kind of animals except dogs that were trained to help them with hunting. Additionally, Samson became a Presbyterian clergyman, and this has largely happened because when he was 16 years old, there was a rumor that there were extraordinary ministers preaching from place to place. Therefore, Samson began to be interested in that type of preaching, and when he was 70 years old, he discovered that the way of salvation was through Jesus Christ, and he was trained to put his trust only in the Christian faith for life and salvation. Furthermore, he lived with Mr. Willock for 4 years, where he was instructed educationally and religiously. On the other hand, he married Mary Fowler, an Indian from Montauk, and they had 10 children. He was also an interpreter, school teacher, and minister to the Indians. Next, we're going to talk about an important historical detail in the life of Samson Occom. Therefore, for me, it is one of the most important historical impacts because it indirectly had a very important role in the history of education for Americans, and it was because when Samson was in Europe, the funds that he earned supposedly had to be used to support his family since his family was very large. But when he returned from Europe, he realized that they were living in poverty since the funds that he had generated during that period of time were used for the creation of Dartmouth College. So, in summary, this character is crucial for demonstrating cultural diversity, indigenous history, and in regard to education. As a consequence, American society was indirectly shaped greatly as a result of this. In this part of the video, we're going to talk about Samson's life. So we're going to start by saying that when Samson was 17 years old, he was awakened and converted, which meant that he had to stop being a pagan to be a clergyman, and in the future minister to the Indians. Samson learned English letters over a period of 6 months after he went with his English neighbors for reading assistance. Despite the fact that he had never attended school, he could learn English. In addition, his faith was so powerful when he discovered the way of salvation through Jesus Christ. The anguish and burden from his mind were removed, and he found serenity and pleasure of the soul in serving God. Also, his desire to read the Bible was so great that when he was 19 years old, he managed to understand a little. He felt pity and compassion for his pagan and poor people, but that wasn't all. At that age, he was under the guardianship of Mr. Willock, and Samson lived with him for 4 years. Shortly after, Mr. Willock mentioned Samson's case to the Boston commissioners, who were honorable members of London society, so that Samson could spread the word of the gospel among the Indians. Unfortunately, over the third year, Samson's health was affected, and he has to stop his studies. Nevertheless, when Samson returned to Mohegan, he had a day and night school, and his payment was whatever the Indians wanted to give him. Then he got married, and Mr. Willock and Mr. Bowles got him to help him with 15 pounds a year. On the other hand, Samson was also a judge and helped people as a conflict counselor. In addition, shortly after getting married, he frequently went to Montauk to care for the Shinnecock Indians. This part is very important since we're going to talk about Samson Occom's pedagogy and the way he taught his students. First, he prayed with them, and then he began to listen to them. He forced them to help each other, and also he forced them to read their books. So when they didn't understand a word, the students show it to Samson, and he instructed them. And their schedule were as follows. In summer, 8 times a day, 4 in the morning, 2 afternoon, and when the class was over, they were forced to spell a word. Another important point to understand why Samson was so important for education was because of his tragedies. An example of this tragedy is the following. He made an alphabet on small pieces of paper and then glued on small cedar chips in this way. In parentheses, A, V, and C, close parentheses. He would arrange them at a settle, then point to a letter and ask a child to bring the paper with a correct letter. But if the child couldn't get the right piece of paper, they had to return the paper as many times as necessary until they got the correct paper, and so on. Finally, he realized how unfair the path was when he realized that other missionaries were paid per mission what for he had done in 12 years. Because in those 12 years, he earned 180 pounds. And other missionaries, they get paid 180 pounds per mission. The worst of all of that is he wondered why he had been using in that way. So he made a comparison with the story of an Indian boy who was beaten by his master just for the simple fact of being Indian. So he was willing to say he was used by them because he couldn't influence other Indians as the other missionaries did. In the conclusion of this video, we will discuss why Samson Occom should be included in our curriculum. The reason for his inclusion is evident. It serves as a clear example of cultural diversity as indigenous history. It's crucial to incorporate Samson Occom into our curriculum because he was a significant indigenous representative who gave a voice to indigenous culture in literature. Throughout history, American literature has often failed to provide sufficient recognition to the Native American community. Samson Occom, as a prominent figure during the colonization and evangelization era, offers a unique and meaningful perspective in the vast literary landscape concerning the Indian experience. Furthermore, his importance extends to the establishment of Dartmouth College, as his family funds were directed toward the creation of the university instead of being retained for personal use. Additionally, one of the most compelling reasons for his inclusion in the curriculum is that he presents the contrasting side of history, shedding light on the indigenous community, literacy, and historical experience. This allows for a comparative analysis of how writers addressed the indigenous theme during colonization, contrasting with the harsh reality Samson Occom lived through.